materials that I'll be using for this demonstration: some A3 layout paper, a HB pencil, and then I'm using 3 different pens, and I like to use these waterproof fine nib pens. I have 0.1, 0.3 and 0.5, and I also have an eraser which will come in handy, and I have this template here for women's wear. Now, I like to use a few sheets of white paper underneath, and that's important so that you don't see the colour of your table showing through, and it makes it easier to see the template. And then the layout pad that I am choosing to work with just means it's much easier to see through the paper, and it's less confusing than working with tracing paper. Okay, so I'm going to start by drawing the basic shape of the dress. I'll then add sleeves, and then I'll work on the 2 more complex sections. It has a round neck. It's not too high, not too low, but typically a neck will be a little bit higher at the back. Start with the shoulders. So I will guess that the shoulders are rather typical shoulders like this. So I'll add in the back neck. So I'll go slightly lower. And then when it comes to the front neck, it can be really nice if you continue this line and make it then continuous. So from the shoulder here, I'm simply going to drop the dress down, making sure to go around the hip to about here. Looks good. So I'll do the same on the other side. Okay, I'm all the time trying to balance the width on this line to the other side. And again, if I make a mistake, that's what I have the eraser for, and I can always make the change when I go to ink it up. Okay, so to add on the sleeve, it's a pretty regular set-in sleeve. I'm imagining the elbow is here, so it's about maybe half to 2/3 of the way to the elbow. So that will mean typical set-in sleeve to about here. I'll go with this height. And again, we tend not to draw these lines straight across because we tend to draw the body and the hemlines as being a little bit round, a little bit like you can see on the hem here and even on the end of the sleeve here. So I will draw that seam there a little bit round, and I will balance that on the other side. So again, working out from the arm roughly the same distance on both sides. Okay, and in this case, the sleeves are actually gathered on, giving us this very slightly rounded shape here, which is essentially straight. It just looks round on the body. So that is giving us this more defined bunching out shape. You need to draw it visually bunching out, and that's the trick that tells you that it's gathered. So first of all, looking at the outline shape, so I'm going to bunch out here and down. The hemline may not read properly in the drawing unless I add a little bit of fullness. I will do that by indicating a wiggle in the line here. So from here, I'll draw a line up, and from underneath, connect that line there. So the next thing that I need to do is to draw in all of these little gathers up at the top. So the best way to draw gathers tends to be really fast and fluid little squiggle shapes that are all slightly different in length. So what I'm going to do is go for a selection of little M's, and some of them end up slightly longer than the others. So I'm going to do the same on the other side. So again, this is gathered flare or gathered fullness, and this we describe more as a flounce on the bottom because there are no gathers here, but we still have all of this added fullness. And looking at this skirt here, to me it looks like it's shorter center front, and it's getting longer then towards the sides and the back. So to do that, I've decided probably the knee is about here, so it's a little bit above the knee. I'm going to start it here, and I'm going to draw that line. There's no fullness in that line, it simply is a straight line. So I'll draw it around to about here, and again on the other side to about here. Connect the line on the side. So a lot of the time people tend to draw the darts straight out, which is suggesting that they're coming from the armhole. It's always nice to put a slight angle on it, and they do not go to the center of the bust. They tend to get taken back from the center of the bust a little. Okay, so now for this flounce at the bottom. So what we need to do first of all is to define the width of the fabric at the bottom. So if we could pull this fabric right out, how wide would it be? So I'm going to start center front, which is really just a little bit below the knee here. And then a little bit similar to what we were doing on the sleeve up here, I'm going to draw the fullness of that line. And then on the other side, same story. Okay, so we have this fullness coming out to here and to here. And then from the bottom, we connect these lines up, showing us that that is indeed full fabric. And then we connect all of these lines in underneath. Okay, so this one got a little bit wide. That's not the end of the world. I can make an adjustment, take off everything that I don't need here. And then because this dress I think is a little bit longer at the back, I'm going to continue this line around to the back with also additional fullness. Now I can see it is a little bit shorter here on the right to the other side, so before I continue I'll just do a quick correction on that. I can simply extend this down and then continuing this line around to the back. Okay. And as a general rule, we're going to ink the front up, and then to do the back view, we're going to trace off that inked drawing. Now, a working drawing only becomes a working drawing once it's been inked up. So inking it up means taking the 3 pens and deciding which ones to use in which part on. So to make that a little bit easier to see, I'm just going to remove the template. So we have point 1, point 3 and point 5. So point 1 is very, very fine. And so this is a seam. So this one here will be point 1. So the seam here is point 1. Again, point 1 on the other side, and this will be a point 1 here. And just as a point here, this dress probably has a facing on the inside. So because we can see into the neck here, it would actually have some understitching in the back neck, indicating that there is a facing in on the inside. And this one here is point 1 as well. So point 3 tends to be for everything else. So I will do point 3 here on the outline, point 3 and point 3 on the outline here. I think all of these lines here, probably best is point 3 for those as well. So I think point 3 for everything down here. And because these gathers are quite fine, I'm going to do the gathers in a point 1 as well. Okay, so with the point 1, I'm going to ink in the seam here and the seam here. So then I have the 2 short darts. This one was slightly higher than this one, so I'm going to correct that now. The seam here on the sleeve. So again, I'm not going to copy exactly what I've done. I'm happy enough to just make it up as I go along with the gathers there. The last of the point 1 up here will be the understitching. So if you're doing stitching, make sure to have it really small, and then the seam on the skirt at the bottom here. Point 3 then I've decided for everything else. So where it overlaps at the bottom, I normally flick up from that point, because I think if I was to draw down to it, I'd never hit the edge of the curve, so it's more reliable to work upwards from there. So for the neckline here, I'm just going to take it a little bit closer to myself. Now as a guide, I probably should have drawn the understitching in afterwards, because that felt like a bit of pressure trying to get that correct. So I think that that is them all. And again, that idea that the flounce is generally not gathered at the top. And just as a general tip, once I've inked it, I'll leave it a minute or two just to make sure that the ink has dried before I do that step. Okay, so that is the completed front view of the dress. So the back view is actually not so difficult, because if this dress was lying down flat on the table and we looked at it from the front, if I was to flip it over, it still has exactly the same outline as the dress from the front. The only difference is from the back we won't be able to see the lower front neck. Apart from that, I think the sleeves will be identical. The back won't have darts, and from the back we won't be able to see the shorter front. So typically a back view has less information and goes faster. But the real trick here is, the easiest way to do it is either to take a second sheet of paper. I normally just fold over the sheet that I've got. Then what I'm going to do, again working in pencil, is trace through the shape of the dress with pencil. I think from the back view that this skirt will not have the same line that went up at the front. I think it will literally go straight across. We tend not to do ruler straight lines in drawings, as I said earlier on. We tend to round everything. It's a little bit more flattering to the drawing. So I'm just going to draw that straight across with a slight curve down. So to make a decision now, when I go to ink up, again the sleeve is sewn into the armhole here with a 0.1 and 0.1 for the sleeve here. Gathers will be the same story of little squiggly pencil marks, and then I'll link those up where I've got the flare here, line up, connect these lines here, and then down at the bottom here I'm ignoring all of this information here, so I will simply draw the flare up from all of these gathers and connect any of the flare or gathers from underneath. Okay. That's how fast the back goes. Okay, so to start with the inking process, I'm going to do the 0.1. So I have 0.1 here for the setting sleeve, 0.1 here, the seam on the actual sleeve itself here with that slight curve. And then just to point out, I think what I've done here in my pencil drawing is actually better than what I've done on the other side. So I'm going to do a slight amendment before I ink it, which is to bunch it out quite nicely before I ink it up. Okay, and that is almost all I have for the 0.1. I have all of these squiggles, and again, the faster you do these, the better they tend to work out. And a point of note, they rarely meet the line of the seam, so they tend to bunch out. When they go to the line of the seam, they can sometimes get a bit confusing. So I'm going to do the 0.3 to here, and then I'm going to zoom back out and do the skirt section. Okay, so that is the back view. So again, to finish that back view, I need to erase the pencil lines. Okay, so that is the back view. So the best way to cut them out with the scissors is not to cut to the line, to always leave the line visible, and to maybe cut 2, 3, 4 millimeters away. So the more you leave, the faster it is to cut. Okay, so I've now finished cutting out the front and the back view of the working drawing, so they're now ready to stick onto whatever page I need to put them onto. What can look quite nice is to overlap the two, so when we overlap we tend to step them a little bit. Now, so these are the final working drawings in the Tech Pack specification sheets that we use in Sallynoggin College of Further Education.